all set for the start of the British Grand Prix, halfway through the 2024 season. Lights out, away we go. George Russell gets a good getaway. Lewis Hamilton tucks in behind. Watch out for Max Verstappen on the inside of Lando Norris behind. But George Russell comfortably through the first corner into turns 2 and 3. And Verstappen has to keep a little bit of an eye on Piastri behind him. Lando Norris now putting pressure on Hamilton, but runs a wheel over the curve. Verstappen's got the outside line. That works really well for Max Verstappen. He gets in front of the McLaren.
And he's going to have a chance at passing Lewis Hamilton immediately as well. Lewis checks the mirror down the Wellington straight here towards Brooklands, and he doesn't need to go defensive. Verstappen, though, has made a crucial pass there on Norris. Yeah, Lando just puts himself in a bit of a precarious position there with Lewis Hamilton nowhere near alongside to commit to that on the outside. He was just drifting wide, and Max picked up the pieces nicely.
Now, let's see what contact here for Alex Albon.
Oh, that's the contact. So it was in the melee with Hulkenberg, but it was actually Fernando Alonso that he hit.
Rain expected in 7 laps, lasting for 10 minutes.
And if it's heavy rain, 10 minutes of it is going to really change things.
Charles Leclerc still keeping the pressure on the green Aston Martin as they head down towards the corner, and Charles Leclerc has a good dive down the inside this time, and Stroll didn't seem to fight that too hard. Charles Leclerc zips past, made it look quite easy.
And this could be a chance for Lando.
You're absolutely right. He was quick through Beckers, quicker than I expected. He's got DRS. Lando Norris is going on the attack, and he passes Max Verstappen. Massive cheers from the grandstands as Lando Norris gets past his huge rival. Norris up into third. And the Australian is really getting that much closer. Whether he's going to be as close as Lando Norris was, let's see. He's got DRS in operation. He's getting that extra straight line speed as they head down towards Stoke Corner. He goes for the inside, and yeah, he's through as well, as long as he can make the corner. It's a bit slippery.
It's raining. It's really slippery. He took the inside line and then immediately thought he'd got in deep. Look, the umbrellas are going up. DRS is still enabled, and Hamilton's going to get it, and he's going to draft straight past Russell here.
George Russell trying to defend from his teammate. Can he do anything? I don't think he can. Lewis Hamilton takes the lead of the British Grand Prix from his teammate. Mercedes still running 1-2 in the damp conditions, but Hamilton becomes race leader once again here at Silverstone. We've got a long way to go in this race, and conditions are continue to change. Teammate George Russell, both off, both run wide.
And we'll look out for Norris, who stays on the track. Is he going to close right into the pack as well? Russell rejoins just ahead of Norris. Piastri's off in the background. It's really chucking it down, and none of them have pitted. Norris to the inside.
Lando Norris takes second place. That was brilliant stuff by Lando Norris. He saw the two Mercedes running deep, and he managed to brake a little earlier.
The track is getting slower and slower. We're now running about 108%. If it hits around 112 before we get through this pocket, then they will have to box. Otherwise, everyone's trying to hold on. Rain, gap, and then big rain coming later.
Look how close Lando Norris is to Lewis Hamilton. There's a real chance he's going to overtake in an unusual area. He's done it. Lando Norris now takes the lead of the British Grand Prix and gets through that corner where there were so many incidents. And now Hamilton's actually back under pressure from his teammate.
So Hamilton found the grip first. Now he just looks like he's struggling. Russell's there. Piastri around the outside. Can he do the Verstappen move on the first lap? Yes, he can if he can get the power down. George keeps it in on the inside.
Oh, Piastri gets the place. Wobble, wobble. And he's up into third position. This is so tight. And it is wet here. Be careful. Otherwise, it's so easy to go and run them wide.
Hamilton's in trouble. Piastri's got a beautiful line on the exit. This could be a McLaren 1-2.
It does look like it. Oscar Piastri getting alongside Lewis Hamilton. Just has to finish the move. Down into Stoke Corner, and he's done it. He's into second place as long as he can hold it together. Yes, that corner's been working very well for him.
Verstappen's going to pit, and Red Bull now roll the dice, which may work because it looks like this is the time to come in for intermediates.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that might be a very good move to come in right now. Sainz coming in as well. So only Norris is told to come in, but this could hurt Piastri later. Hamilton's told to come in.
Mercedes double stack. Russell's in behind him. There's Verstappen behind Hamilton, but now ahead of George Russell.
So that is a good, important gain for Max Verstappen.
Piastri will be struggling on this in-lap. He was looking really good as the rain fell, but he was 20 seconds away from a dry pace on the last lap. So this is really going to hurt Oscar Piastri.
And Piastri, you could see, look at the order. He's just dropping down that order. And we shall wait to see whether Hulkenberg... No, he's out well in front of Hulkenberg, in fact. On board with Kevin Magnussen. What was he up to? Oh! My goodness, he did well to save that.
I have seen many a car end up on that inside barrier. You get out wide and look at the moisture coming off that the painted surface on the outside.
Oh, Russell's being told retire the car. George Russell in the pits. Oh my goodness, the man who started from pole position, who took victory last week in Austria. He is out of the British Grand Prix. Oh, he's never had a podium here, and it continues, this time with a DNF. Oh, shake of the head for George.
Hamilton's in and Norris stays out. He comes past the commentary box.
So this is fascinating. Is this going to be the right decision to go onto the slick tyres on this lap? Interestingly, Verstappen has come in as well.
We need the Fox. The soft is better now. Any slick tyres.
In he comes. This has got to be perfect.
It has.
Hamilton was a second and a half quicker in the middle sector. McLaren might have blown it by staying one extra lap, and Lewis is going to come through if Lando has a decent pit stop with tyres fired up and a chance to win. Lando's so long in his box as well.
It's not a great stop, and Hamilton's just going out of the club corner and heading on down past the start-finish straight. He's going past us, and Lewis Hamilton, I think, is going to be in front as they come out. Yes, he's got. There's Hamilton. Hamilton comes out in front of Lando Norris, and the pit stop that Mercedes chose was perfect from that point of view. It has switched the two leaders around, and it's multiple British Grand Prix winner Lewis Hamilton who is now back in front. Watch them through here. If the gap closes between Verstappen and Lando Norris through this part, it stays fairly... No, it's actually a good exit from Max there, though, and the DRS will be coming in. This is a chance to close right in on Lando Norris. Here comes Max Verstappen. He moves to the outside, and he makes the move. He's up into second place, and Lando was not able to fight that. He is about to head for victory as he comes into the final corners here at Silverstone. The crowds are going crazy. Lewis Hamilton wins the British Grand Prix. He takes his 9th win at Silverstone, his first win in nearly 1,000 days in Formula One, his 104th victory ever. Absolutely brilliant.
Get in there, Lewis! You're the man! Thank you so much, guys. It means a lot. It means a lot to get this one. A big thank you to all the fans here. Love you guys.
And what a sign-off for our joint trajectory here on the British Grand Prix. We couldn't wish for anything better.
This is a lovely moment, isn't it? And you can see the emotion, even though we can't see his face, you can feel the emotion in Lewis with his dad. And this is a really special moment.
This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? This will be Season 6, Episode number 26 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's the 2024 British Grand Prix race review show, and you've got Andy, and I am joined with, it's been a whole whopping 11 hours since he dominated the poker tables against us in my sister's basement last night, but I'm along with Mr. Cody. The aces were in your favor last night, but how have you been since I last saw you?
Honestly, it's a little rough getting up for the race this morning. Late night, lots of poker that I won. But yeah, it's great to hang out with everyone, get some delicious barbecue.
Yeah.
Also went to Renaissance Fair yesterday before going to barbecue, so it was a long day for me, man. But I still made it up to watch.
Good for
British
you.
Grand Prix.
And it was well worth it, as we will discuss. It was well worth the time and investment. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it, because we're going to talk about it in just a little bit. But if you have found our show, as David Croft would say, welcome along. You can find us on Twitter or X or whatever Elon Musk is continuing to call whatever's left of his platform. Instagram, we're also there. Discord, Reddit, and of course YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you enjoy what you are seeing, because we're going to do video tonight, and you like what you're hearing, you can do as the kids do and smash that subscribe button, or you can leave us a like. If you're on your favorite podcasting app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a 5-star review if you're so inclined. Doesn't give us any money or anything like that. Just helps us come up a little bit better in search results and allows us to get our content to you that much quicker. You can email the show, chat now at outlapf1.com. We'll take you there. Thank you so much to our continued monetary supporters, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a member of that hashtag OutlapF1 Nation and get your name shouted out on every episode, you can see our anchor page and leave us a little bit of money if you'd like to. $1, $5, all goes into making the show better. All goes into either upgrading equipment we already have or buying some new equipment to try to spread our net out a little bit if we can. Last reminder, the good folks at Manscaped we have a code with them, and you can use it to get 20% off and free shipping with the code OUTLAP. That's OUTLAP, all one word. All right, so we will start with our headline of the day, and when there are multiple lines, that usually is a good thing because we have lots of things to talk about. So, Cody, I will let you go first. What you got here?
Mine is, this was the feel-good hit of the summer. Lewis Hamilton gets his first win in over 2 years, and it could not come at a better place around Silverstone in his home. This also results in Lewis Hamilton taking the standalone record now for most wins at a single track with a whopping 9 around Silverstone. A fan favorite event if there ever was one.
Yeah, very good. So mine is competitive racing. I feel like we should have a town sign that says, "Welcome to the town of competitive racing." Because guess what? We've arrived, and it's awesome. This is what we've wanted. We have 4 teams that any one of them at any given Sunday now appear primed and ready to win a race. And today proved that in spades. It also proved a lot of folks incorrect. Folks that doubted that the cost cap was ever going to be a good thing. Folks that said this rules package would never work. And folks that said Lewis Hamilton would not ever win again in a Mercedes. They're wrong too. Old is still good. The guys still got it. What a drive from Lewis today. All right, so we will rewind before we get into all of that again, and we will start with the qualifying that feels like forever and a day ago, given all of the events of what we're going to talk about today. But that happened on Saturday, and we shall start with our quali recap. Going out in P20 and a harbinger of bad things to come. Not only did he have a 50-place grid penalty, but he didn't have a really good qualifying either. That was Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. Wow. And more wow. The P19 is Sergio Checo Perez out in Q1 again. You want to hear a stat? Logan Sargent has out-qualified Sergio Perez 7 times. Wow, crazy. P18, Esteban Ocon. P17, Kevin Magnussen. P16, Valtteri Bottas. P15 was Daniel Ricciardo. P14 was Zhao Guanyu. P13, Yuki Tsunoda. P12, there he is again, Logan Sargent in the Williams. Where did that come from? And P11, the other big hitter not in the top 10, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. We're going to have to talk about those guys. The top 10 from 10 to 1, P10, Fernando Alonso. P9, Alex Albon, Williams. Hello, how you doing there? P8, Lance Stroll. P7, Carlos Sainz. P6, one of the stars of qualifying for sure, Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. P5 was Oscar Piastri. P4 was Max Verstappen. P3 was Lando Norris. P2 was Lewis Hamilton. And P1 with a Mercedes front row lockout, George Russell in the other Mercedes. 3 Brits on the first 3 places. The first time that has ever happened in the history of the British Grand Prix. Woo! So I would imagine the Brits were happy with this one, Cody, but thoughts on the quali?
So I didn't get to watch qualifying live this time on account of going to the Renaissance Fair at the crack of dawn. That said, I did sneak a peek at my phone briefly just to see what the results were. And the page that I look at just shows, the top 3. And I see George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, and Lando Norris. And I'm kind of doing those, what the hell happened? It's like expecting, I expect to see Lando up there at the front, but I was also expecting, maybe see Max, Piastri, perhaps, or maybe like one of the Mercedes squeaking in. But no, it's a Mercedes front row. I thought for a moment that I'd fallen back in time to the year 2020, which would have been a bad thing for just a whole lot of reasons. But I knew that it was going to be an exciting race just from that. Very excited to see Lewis Hamilton on the front row. George Russell was making it look like he's really here to stay. His form has been much better this year than it was last year. He's definitely got the edge on Hamilton in qualifying pace so far this season. And after getting the win last time out, I thought he had a really good shot of doing 2 in a row, which would have been quite something.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the front and you go, my God, confidence really does matter. And it totally mattered in the case, I think, of the Mercedes, who were riding one, they had the really good, tricky, changeable conditions like they had in Canada, where they showed really well. And I think that car in qualifying over 1 lap pace really likes those conditions, which you had, because the quali one was wet, then it dried out. The sun actually came out, and then we got a couple of kind of more traditional dry, soft tire runs. The other thing that I noticed, at least in terms of, Max was definitely gettable. More so than I probably would have expected, because you would have thought a lot more high-speed corners. I would have figured Red Bull would have been really, really good here. And that, you contrast what Max did with what Sergio didn't do, and you just look at it, I'm just, it's a question mark over my head. What did you miss? Something went really, really bad. But anyway, just looking through this, the other big hitter, not in the top 10, what's up with Ferrari? Did Charles Leclerc sell his F1 soul to win in Monaco? Because since that race, it's been not good. And here he is outside the top 10 yet again. Better form across the board from both Williamses. Logan Sargent P12, Alex Albon P9, Lance Stroll P8. So from both of the Astons and the Williams, I thought were much better. And there's Nico Hulkenberg in 6th place. Hello, how you doing? It wasn't just Austria. But yeah, and when it came down to Q3, it was kind of a couple things. One, I know Lando aborted his last lap, so we never got to see his final attempt in Q3. So the time he actually posted was his first lap. Now, he did have 2 new sets of tires, and he didn't make it happen there. But the other thing that happened was, especially with Oscar, I think the qualifying deltas got a little messed up in terms of the spacing. There were a couple drivers who were trying to really had to go really hard to make the line. Oscar was one of them. I think when he came out, McLaren told him you were minus 10 seconds, and he comes back, he goes, minus 10? So he had to kind of get on his horse just to make the line to try to get his last attempt in. So it was not necessarily a straightforward, normal qualifying fight, but still, full props to both Mercedes drivers who made it happen, especially when it counted. So good on both George and Lewis, and not a lot in it across, I think, the top 5.
Yeah, not too much going on there. Only flag, big flag of the session was there was the red flag in Q1 where Sergio Perez had a slip, went off in the gravel, and his day was done. And you got the camera right on Horner giving the head shake, and it's just, I'm sure the rumors are just going to keep building and building as to what's going to happen with him. But Max P5. It's crazy how you think, or was it P4? Either way, it's very low. Yeah, P4. There we go. P4 for Max. It's crazy how we consider that to be a low starting position for him. And then you have Perez down out in Q1 again, and we're just like, that's run of the mill at this point.
The spin that you very accurately mentioned happened on his outlap. That's like, it wasn't even a flyer. And I don't know, it looked like he just literally lost the car. It got beached. Now, obviously, the other theme throughout the course of this entire British Grand Prix weekend was the weather. You were literally playing peekaboo with different rain bands throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All 3 days would have periods of very heavy rain. Then the sun would come out. Then it would rain again, and you really couldn't stay on top of it. So Q1, as I mentioned, that starts in the wet. They then transitioned to dry, and this was Perez's first lap on the dry tire, and he literally spun and beached it. The more pressure is just going to get upped over the course of the next 2 weeks. Because he's not performing. And as we're going to talk about in the race, it didn't translate to Sunday. That's for sure. All right. So we will leave the qualifying there. We will now move into the race itself, a very eventful race. So we will start with our back markers, but we're probably going to fly through them other than a couple because we have a whole ding-dong to talk about in the front 5 spots, front 6 spots, really, if you think about it. But going out in the back markers, and I feel really bad for Pierre Gasly at this point. Not only does he have the 50 place grid penalty because he changed everything. I think the Alpine just kind of made the decision to say, whatever's on that car, we're going to change it all. And then he doesn't even get to start the race. So he gets the dreaded DNS and does not get classified. The other non-classified finisher was leading early, then struggled a little bit. We never got to see the end of the story for George Russell because I think he only made it 33 laps in and then had to retire due to a water pressure failure. So he gets the dreaded DNF and does not score any points here. P18, Zhao Guanyu. P17, there's that Sergio Perez again. That was all he could do. 2 laps down to the leader. Wow. P16 was Esteban Ocon. P15, Valtteri Bottas. P14, the other wow. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. We're going to have to talk about what he did. And then P13 was Daniel Ricciardo. So I imagine this is going to be centered around Perez and Leclerc. But Cody, what you got for the back markers?
Pretty much that. I figure we're going to get to George Russell when we start talking about the front runners. But yeah, it is really disappointing that his day got cut short by something completely outside of his control. And, he had it on to at least finish in the top 5, if not, scoring a podium. So, just really awful luck for George. Sad to see. Really bad outing this time around for the Alpines. Neither one of them making it into the points. As you said, Pierre Gasly doesn't even get the start, although he did give me, or Alpine gave me, a really good laugh when I saw the thing about the 50 place grid penalty. I was thinking it was like 50 places. Like, what the heck? Is he going to be starting like 2 races from now? But it didn't end up mattering. Changed everything on the car, and he didn't even get anything to show for it in the race. And then, yes, still talking about Sergio Perez and how badly his form has slumped lately. Not only is he starting at the back, but he stayed there pretty much the entire race. There was a couple periods in the race here where the rain showers were coming and going. So it started, pretty dry. A small rain shower came a little bit into the race, and at that point, most drivers were trying to stick it out on the slicks if they could, because this rain shower was supposed to be pretty short, and they figured that if they could stay on the slicks, they wouldn't really lose a lot of time. They wouldn't have to, come back in and get slicks again once the rain shower had passed. And not only that, it was forecasted that an even longer, heavier rain shower was going to come after that second dry spell. So they decided they were going to try, I guess, like a Hail Mary strategy with Perez. And I believe it was at this point where they put him on, I can't remember exactly because, like I said, it's fuzzy. It was early this morning and I was just ever so slightly hungover. But I believe it was at this point that they put him on the intermediates, and the track ended up drying out rather quickly. So he wasn't really getting any pace out of those intermediate tires. He pretty much was hung out to dry at that point. And yes, he finishes way at the back with a very poor showing. Poor strategy on that, but I suppose with him being that far back, you had to try something.
Yeah, I mean, I did read a tweet of his after the race where he said we basically tried a home run, and what do we have to lose? And at least it gave Max some positive feedback type of thing. So, I mean, if they were just going to take the sacrificial lamb and throw him on the fire. I guess that's kind of what Red Bull chose to do there. The other one, Charles Leclerc, who went on to the intermediates way too early and then ended up having to try to stick that out when the rain did show up. That didn't work because he basically cooked them. The thing with the intermediate tires is you got to get on them when there's enough to have some spray. Otherwise, they get too hot too quickly and they literally just disintegrate. And that was pretty much what you saw with Leclerc, was he got on those intermediates a couple laps too early because, yeah, you're right. The first rain shower was supposed to be the quick hitter, then a break, then the bigger, more significant rain. And he tried to do it at the end of the quick hitter, right when it was stopping. So that really did not help his cause. And once he was kind of down there, that was pretty much the end of any sort of competitive nature for him. He also finishes a lap down to the leader as well. So not a good day for the Leclerc camp for sure. And yeah, we'll talk about Perez when we get to awards and all the rest of that, because I think we've got some for Sergio here. It's not becoming
one he got.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. It's not funny anymore. This is now serious things. There are reports that said he's already in breach of the exit clauses that Red Bull can trigger. One being, I think, like if he's more than 100 points behind Max in the standings, and if he's not scoring a certain average finish, and he's not doing either of those things. So Red Bull now hold all the cards, and we know how that team operates. It's either you perform or you're gone. And yeah, we know Max wants to have Sergio as a teammate, but you just have to wonder how long this is going to be able to keep going, especially when it goes like this, because yikes indeed. All right, so we will move into the midfield, which saw P12 have Kevin Magnussen, P11 just missing out on points. Wouldn't that have been something had Logan Sargent scored a point at the British Grand Prix, especially given what time of the year it is here in the U.S.? But P10 scoring the last point was Yuki Tsunoda. P9, Alex Albon does get 2 points for Williams, so that's big for them. P8 was Fernando Alonso. P7, Lance Stroll, so double points for Aston Martin, who had been struggling, but looked like they showed pretty well, especially early here. P6, if it's not the race winner, I think this is my star of the show, and nobody saw any of it. That was Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas. My gosh. Talk about some good form coming for Haas's way lately. Upgrades working on a Haas. Stop the presses. P5, Carlos Sainz, who did pit last and get the fastest lap point. And P4, Oscar Piastri. So now, and we'll just kind of transition into the podium because I think you really can't talk about the midfield without talking about the podium. So P3 was Lando Norris. P2, Max Verstappen. And in P1, race win number 104 in his career, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. All right, so let's just kind of go right into it. Let's talk about the fight at the front. Cody, set it up, and I'll tell you my thoughts as we go.
All right, so race starts with George Russell taking the lead. You've got Lewis Hamilton following suit right behind. A little bit of things shuffling around in the places right behind there. I believe Max got all the way up to third.
Correct.
Fourth or third. Yeah, I think third right around that time. And they get going. The Mercedes end up getting a little bit of a lead built up. And then about a quarter of the way through the race, you get Max Verstappen looking like he's really struggling for pace. He's complaining of tire wear. He gets passed without putting up any defense by both Lando Norris and a lap or two later, Oscar Piastri. So Max Verstappen seems like he's fallen further and further out of the running for this race. Meanwhile, it looks like it's going to be a battle between the Mercedes and the McLarens. And we get into, I think, right around that first rain shower. Hamilton takes the lead, the crowd goes wild, and it looks like it's going to be just a nutty one, which we've been waiting for it. We've been waiting for having so many teams that don't include Red Bull all vying for the victory.
Yeah, and the changeable conditions really played to different teams at different times based on those conditions. It's one of the things about Formula One that I love so much is to watch how this interplays, because you see where certain teams are good. So when it got cool and a little damp and a little bit kind of, grainy out there, the McLaren pace fired up. All of a sudden, both Lando and Oscar looked like they had afterburners on, and starts, Lando with a beautiful pass around Max, clean, wonderful driving from Max, no issues there, no residual
I like how
signs.
no defense is wonderful driving.
Well, but there wasn't really anything to do there, but he didn't make any sort of a rash defensive move. Piastri gets past him. At one point, Lando then gets past Russell and then Lewis and takes over the lead. That second rain shower is now hitting, and now we kind of have our first real inflection point, because believe it or not, I think at this point it was Lando and Oscar 1-2, Lewis was third, Russell was fourth, and I think Max was all the way down in fifth. And now we're getting to that crossover point. When do you put on the inters, and how do you run? So the first two that took it, I think, were Max and Carlos Sainz. So they went onto the intermediates right away. The next lap was two different differentiating strategies between the Mercedes and the McLarens. McLaren pits Lando from the lead. He comes in and takes a set of intermediates. Mercedes chose to double stack. Now, the other thing was Piastri was literally like a second behind Lando. So they, instead of double stacking, elected to keep Piastri out for another lap. That, I think, proved fatal ultimately to Oscar Piastri's overall chance to get a race win, because that was definitely not the right call. It had gotten too wet. I think he lost something like 10 or 12 extra seconds on that extra lap. By the time he comes in, he's down all the way in sixth and now behind Carlos Sainz. So from Piastri's perspective, even though he had some good pace when they went to the intermediates, he could not necessarily get past Carlos Sainz, and that really kind of killed his chance for an overall better result, podium or race win for sure. So you ended up now on the intermediates with Lando out in front. Eventually, George Russell does retire in this second phase, so you take him out. And you've got Lando over Hamilton over now Max. And at this point, it was kind of normal service kind of resumed. It had kind of calmed down a little bit until then, of course, the rain shower stops and the track starts to dry out. And now we enter pit stop sequence number 2. When are you going to then put the slick tires on? And then, of course, then what tire are you going to select? So at this stage, I think it was, again, Max and Lewis that came in first. Lewis fits on a used set of soft tires. Max fits on what seemed to be not the right call at the time, but where were we all proven wrong, a set of hard tires. And Lando stays out for an extra lap. Lando comes around. We're going to talk about the discussion sequence for McLaren in a minute, but I'll just kind of say what happened. Lando does pit. He slides a little bit forward in his box. It's a slower stop because of it. Lando does fit on another used set of soft tires and goes back out. But at this point, Hamilton has now repassed Lando for the lead. We get to the last 10 laps. It is clear from now the two guys in the back, Piastri and Sainz, who were about 10 or 12 seconds behind all of this at the front three, also pit. Piastri goes on to a new medium tire, and Sainz goes on to, I think it was a medium tire as well. But then eventually Carlos boxes, puts on a soft tire, and goes out and sets the fastest lap. But he had a 20-second gap over, I think, Hulkenberg, so he was more than safe to do that. But anyway, what you're seeing now on the timing is Piastri setting purple sectors with that new medium. Verstappen setting purple sectors with the new hard tire. And both Lando and Max are kind of ding-donging a little bit, but it's kind of holding station for a while. Eventually, Lewis does build, I think, about a 2.5 to 3 second gap. I think that's what they came out with. And Max does close the gap on Lando, and with about 4 laps to go, does pass him to come back in P2. if Max literally, I think, runs out of laps, I think if he had maybe another 3 or 4 laps, that we may be talking a very, very different tune about who won this race. But Lewis is able to hold on at the end of the day, make those soft tires last just enough to come home 1.465 seconds in front of Max to take a very popular, very emotional victory for him. All right, so that's the what happened. Now we got to get into why and where we go from here. But Cody, first initial thoughts on that fight at the front.
I thought it was extremely exciting. I thought that it was formed at the end by both some really good pit calls and some really poor pit calls, because, as you said, heading into that last stint, they put Lando Norris on used softs. It looked like he was starting to close the gap on Hamilton there for a little while, but he just couldn't make the tires last, and eventually he started to fall back into the clutches of Max. Now, Max was on the other side of that with a really good pit call there at the end. He seemed to have been struggling with tire life through his first couple stints. He was complaining on the radio, I believe both for the slick stint at the beginning and his intermediate stint, that the tire wear was pretty extreme for him. And it looked like that was why he was having a hard time keeping up with the leaders, why he was falling back behind the McLarens about a quarter of the way through the race. So they decided to fit him with hard tires, which the announcers were pretty confused by and wondering how good of a call that was. But I figured that the Red Bull team was probably looking at what was happening and going, look, if he can get heat in the tires and just keep it on the track until those hard tires come to grips, it's going to actually last him the rest of the race at least, and give him a good chance at picking up some ground. And he really did. He was setting fastest lap after fastest lap. There was points during this race where I thought Max was going to finish right around where he started or even further back. It looked like he was going to maybe even fall behind Carlos Sainz at one point and be down in 6th place. And yet, we talk about how Max is inevitable. He didn't get the race win this time, and I think that was probably good because Britain would have rioted. However, he did show that he is inevitable still, because he somehow fought back to 2nd place, got past Lando once the soft tires had reached pretty much the end of their effective life. And as you said, a little bit longer, a few more laps, and he was probably going to catch Hamilton. And frankly, big Max fan, but I'm happy he didn't catch him this time, because I think Lewis Hamilton really deserved this win. He was also on soft tires, but he did an excellent job of making them last. Up at the front, was keeping his lap times very consistent throughout that last stint and just trying to squeeze everything he could out of those tires to get to the end of the race. As you said, also very popular and emotional victory. Like I said at the beginning, feel good moment for everybody here to see Lewis, break his winless streak at the best place for him. Earlier on in that, we did have a whole other set of good and bad pit strategy calls. I do think that the McLaren opting not to double stack strategy was a poor one. It did take Oscar Piastri out of the mix at the front. He lost a lot more time going around that extra lap than he would have if they had just gone with the double stack. We saw that with Mercedes. They made this double stack work pretty well. And Piastri probably would have finished behind Russell had it not been for Russell retiring with that bad luck. And yeah, I feel like Oscar pretty much squeezed everything he could out of this race post that call. 4th place was very nice, and it may have even been, with how things could have turned out, he might have still ended up in 4th place anyway. But it did really suck to see him have no chance at that point, barring something like a safety car, to fight for the win.
Yeah, so all right, I've gone long enough. Let's get into the McLaren strategy pit wall and the discussions that I heard, because I was following both Oscar and Lando's race. And as I've said before, if you want to get some of the inside story on what you see happen on the track, this is why you should do that. Because if you have an F1 TV subscription or you have an alternate way to watch F1 TV, I know there's some good apps out there. Do this because it enhances your understanding of what was happening. So on the Lando side, on the first call, I thought they got 98% of it right. And 2% of it proved really fatal for Oscar because they were both talking. There was active communication on both ends as to what the track was doing and when they felt it was good. Lando was saying he was still okay. He felt comfortable. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be a driver call, especially when the track is too wet. That the engineers can put their hands out and say that this is the class whatever rain. That communication I thought was active. It was good. It was where it needed to be. Lando was given the right information at that point. And so was Oscar. Both sides of this at this point, that was the right idea. Where it got freaky and what I didn't understand was how come no double stack? Why was that not even really considered? I never even heard it in the communication that was even an option. And I even yelled when I saw Oscar go back out. I'm like, double stack? Why not do that? And you watch, of course, there's Mercedes who executed a very nice double stack. And I'm thinking, even if you lose 5 seconds, 5 is less than 20, which is what Oscar ended up losing. And I get double stacks is probably the hardest maneuver that a pit crew has got to do. But come on, it was screaming for it. So yeah, that was... What'd you say?
I said you practice those for this situation.
Exactly. And I know they drill. When we've gone to Coda, we watch the pit stops practice. And they literally do front wing, rear wing. You never see a real change of a rear wing anymore, but they can do that. Double stack, puncture on certain tires. They drill this. It is routine. They do it throughout the course of the weekend. So why not use it here? Andrea Stella did come out and say he thought he should have double stacked and agrees with that was a strategic error. So that was the thing that kind of messed up Piastri. But it was still, Lando was still he comes out in P1. So, I mean, he got through the first change of conditions and he was still looking pretty good. When we get to the second one, especially from Lando being in the lead, it's really tough to be the canary because if you make the thing on the wrong call, you're going to drop and there's no coming back to that. If you are a lap early, it's really hard to try to make that call from the lead. So I understood the discussion. They were having an active conversation, but at some point it turns into there were too many options. I think that they were trying to give Lando all of what was going on. And it felt like they gave him almost too much information, where it was almost like, look, we can fit a soft, a medium, or a hard. Which one would you like based on what you think the car can do? Those were the questions they were asking. And instead, we got into what were the guys on the softs doing? Was it any better? What's Hamilton doing? What was Max doing? And it was like so much other factors. And meanwhile, Lando's trying to drive the car and keep it on black stuff. But he ultimately makes the call, and it literally gets to the end when he comes in, and I think it was broadcast. He said, any slick tire. I think he was done trying to think about it. I literally think it was information overload. Meanwhile, on the Oscar side, Oscar said it right away. He goes, by the way, we have a new medium, and Oscar said, yes, that was the tire. That was all that needed to happen. Instead, you had this almost like committee meeting and nobody wanted to make the decision. And the other thing that annoyed me about that whole process was the difference between what Red Bull did and what McLaren did. What did Red Bull do? They fitted a set of hards. How did they know to do that? Because they know what their car can and can't do. I don't think McLaren know that yet. And that's a problem. And we're seeing that come out where they get caught in the middle. And instead, what they were trying to do was they were waiting for others to kind of be the canary and to kind of push them in one way or the other. And they literally waited themselves too long. And by the time they made the decision, it basically came down to, do I cover Max or do I cover Lewis? Lando, I think, never thought Max was ever going to come back into the equation, and he says, cover Lewis. So they fitted him with a used set of soft tires, which had already gone through a qualifying run. It's a C3 tire on a track that destroys tires. That doesn't sound good. Like I got it, but there were also too many laps left. There were like 12 laps to go. And he tried to lift his pace. He tried to get back to there. He gets to within, I think, 1.8 seconds at one point. But after that, those tires were cooked. He said the front left had gone, and they tried to change the settings to help out a little bit, but by then it was not enough, and he wasn't going to catch Lewis. And then Max just comes out and basically nowhere. I think he was 9 seconds behind Lewis after that pit stop sequence, comes all the way to a second and a half. And that's what I keep telling everybody about Max is you have to not just beat him once. You have to keep beating him again and again and again, because he's still there's always going to be a push. There's always going to be a push. And dang it if he didn't just run out of laps. Mm-hmm. Wow. But it was all the way, I will say, this is fascinating to watch. The interplay, all that. Was I happy with the result? Not terribly, because I'm a Lando fan. I mean, I was happy that Lewis won. Hang on. I was really happy that Lewis won. But from the Lando side, I was like, we've done it to ourselves again. And Lewis is, and I don't want to take any of that away, because I was thinking like all day, like, okay, what do I say about this? Do I make it that McLaren threw it away and handed it to Lewis? I don't think that's right, because I think Lewis actually went out and took it and deserves all the accolades that he's going to get from this. So anyway, them's my thoughts on what I saw. Cody, you can counter me if you'd like.
I definitely think McLaren had a very legitimate shot of winning this race. I don't think that Mercedes was running away with it. I think that Lewis did an excellent job, fought at the front the entire race, was always there, making good calls, made the tires last. Yeah, he definitely deserved the race win. That said, I do think that Lando and maybe even Oscar had an equally good chance of winning this race had some of the strategy calls swung a different way. Had Lando had a harder set of tires that were going to last longer for better pace. Had he come in for that last pit stop a lap earlier, there's all kinds of things that they could have done just a little bit better that would have given him a better chance, because like you said, he came, closer than 2 seconds at one point there at the end. And, if you get into DRS range, he's going to close that last second really quick. So he was just about there, but just ran out of tires there at the end.
The kicker is he had a new set of mediums, and they had set it up just like the Austria weekend to have that new set of mediums at the end. And it was like, you planned this out and you got to where all you needed to do was go to the plan. And for some reason, you second guessed what you had planned out. And that's what I'm not understanding. And again, to me, it came down to there has to be at some point when you get into that situation, and I can tell, I'm sure there's probably somebody at Red Bull that just says, this is what we're doing, and the discussion part needs to end because he has to come down the pit lane. It felt like they were discussing this up until the moment that he literally came down the pit lane. Now, I know that there's some delay on the onboard, and you're not synced into really where he is when he hears the message and all that, and I get that, but at some point you got to just say, Lando, this is what we're doing. We feel the medium is better. Trust it.
It's the team's job to make that call. Yeah. And you want all the input you can get from your driver so that you feel confident that you are making the right call, because they're the ones out there driving around the track that are going to know what the car feels like and how the tires are feeling and where the life is at. But yeah, ultimately you have people there on the wall who are there and paid to be strategy people who are going to make that call because they're looking at the numbers and they're going to, make that call for the driver's benefit, even if the driver doesn't necessarily agree at the time. And yeah, this would have been one of those times where, you decide, maybe we don't have enough tire life on these used softs to go the last, 15 to 20 laps, however much was
I think
left
it was
at that
12,
time.
but yeah.
Yeah, 12 laps. Maybe you don't have enough tire life to get to the end. Mediums, yeah, we should really do mediums. And then, if you're kind of not giving your driver just a hard set, we're doing mediums, it gives them room to, hem and haw and talk each other out of it. So
Yeah,
I think they need to be more solid on the calls.
Yeah, and Lando had opened the door early when they had asked the initial question, and he goes, "I'm not really sure." And I think what Lando wanted was someone to make the decision. And instead, they went back to, let's collaborate on this decision. And it got to the end where Lando, I don't think, cared because he was really done talking about the decision. So, and I think that's like, if there's a fault with what McLaren did, it was more of a process thing versus, and there was some execution. The pit stop was not good. Lando slid. That didn't help. But I do think even if Lewis had come on ahead and Lando's on that new set of mediums, just like in Austria, he could have possibly chased that down. Oscar's pace showed you that.
I think we've done a good job of beating McLaren a little bit to a pulp here, even though they finished third and fourth, which really isn't that bad of a finish. But I guess a few honorable mentions we had here, and this was a little bit funny on the broadcast because there was so much fighting for the lead from so many different drivers that was where the camera followed most of the time. So we had a whole bunch of interesting things happen that really didn't get a whole lot of TV time. Like we've got Nico Hulkenberg finishing sixth again in a Haas. So he is on the form of his life right now. I bet, Audi Sauber is really happy that he is hitting this form just before he's going to be joining that team. We had both the Aston Martins, as you said, Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso making it to the points, which is a big step forward for them after their struggles lately. We got a Williams in the points. We had, Alex Albon, 9th place, getting a couple points. Yuki Tsunoda returning to that 10th place that he is so familiar with, that 10th, 11th area. Logan Sargent didn't get into the points, but I gotta say, 11th for him with how many cars finished this race is actually quite promising. I don't think at this point there's much that's going to save his seat for him, but it was refreshing to see him doing this well and actually having a pretty nice weekend. And then Kevin Magnussen in 12th place had pretty much the only real hint of what could have been a safety car that we saw this whole race, which, by the way, this race had all of this intrigue without any safety cars or red flags or any such. But Magnussen, as you told me before the broadcast before the podcast here, was really trying because he lost it coming out of the turn, and it looked like he was going to whip around across the track and perhaps go to the inside barrier, but he managed a pretty awesome save and kept it on the track. So even though didn't make it to the points, I think 12th place is still pretty respectable for him.
Yeah, I mean, Haas form, this is, now they are really challenging. They are only, when we get to the standings, you're going to see they are only, I think, 4 points out of P6. They're talking, they want to go chase Aston Martin down for P5. Let's get to P6 before you get to P5. But, I mean, this is definitely encouraging form. Apparently, they have brought upgrades in the last couple races, and those upgrades are correlating and working. And when have we ever been able to say that about Haas and upgrades? And Io Kodamatsu, man, is humming the good song over at Haas, and they're getting results out of it. And it's fun to watch when we can see it. Now, it would have been nice to have actually seen some of the tribulations of Nico Hulkenberg, who scores really good points and should have been on TV just a tad more. But, that's just kind of the way it goes. But, yeah, I mean, it was competitive up and down this grid. For the most part, I thought there was competition all over. This was Formula One should take a bow. They should point to this race and say, this is what we wanted when we changed the rules. This is what we wanted when we put the cost cap in. If they're all like this and we have so many talking points coming out of it, Yeah, I'm in for that. I mean, if we got 12 more that are like this, we're at the halfway point of the season now officially. And if we got 12 more like this, this is going to be, we're going to have some fun this summer and fall for sure. Wow. All right. So we will leave our British Grand Prix review here. We will take a quick break. We will come back. We'll recap what all this did to the point standings. Some very interesting, not a huge shuffle, but the shuffles that are happening are very interesting and all of that. And then we're going to open it up to the fan email segment. And boy, have you all delivered for us on this one. Probably the most contributors we've had in a long time to this show. We do have our regulars. We've got some new people who wanted to join the conversation. We've got a new old guy who was joining the conversation as well. I'm not surprised he chimed in, especially given who won. So we're going to get into all that. We'll react to it. We'll hand out our awards. We'll talk some predictions. When Max doesn't do well, it kind of blows up our predictions. And that kind of sort of happened again. So we'll get into all that in just a little bit. And then we will also tee up and preview our interview with Guardian reporter Jill Richards, which should be happening later on this week. So come on back. You won't want to miss any of that. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back in. This is Season 6, Episode 26 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 British Grand Prix review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. And we may be a little hungover, but we are pressing through, dang it. And we just talked about an enthralling and thrilling and attention-keeping throughout. I think I was actually physically tired after this race from the tension. And I have to say, I loved every minute of it because of it. So, British Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to recap where all of what the results do to the standings. So, Cody, if you want to take the drivers, I will chime in with the team standings.
Sounds good. In first place, we still have Max Verstappen, who, despite what I thought was going to be the case at the beginning of this race, somehow manages to still extend his lead in the driver's standings. So Max Verstappen is now up to 255 points, which opens up the gap just a little bit more to Lando Norris, who is in second place for McLaren with 171 points. Third place, Charles Leclerc, just hanging on after this one. Third place for Ferrari with 150 points, and just behind him, his teammate Carlos Sainz with 146 points. Oscar Piastri, decent performance here, keeping that McLaren moving up through the standings. He has 124, so starting to catch up to those Ferraris. Sergio Perez slipping back further and further. He is now down in sixth place in the standings, with only 118 points so far this year. Seventh place, George Russell stood to make big gains this race. Alas, was not to be after that equipment failure for him. So he is in seventh with 111 points. And now, after the race victory, only 1 point behind him is Lewis Hamilton with 110 points. And then ninth place and 10th place are being held onto by the Aston Martins. So ninth place, Fernando Alonso with 45 points, and Lance Stroll in 10th, 23.
All right. And our driver standings kind of are now mirroring almost exactly the team standings in a kind of weird way. It feels like a Noah's Ark driver standings. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. But looking at the teams, Red Bull Racing Powertrains continue to lead. They are up to 373 points in the first half of the season. Second place is Ferrari. They move up because of Carlos Sainz's good work today to 302 points. Now hot on their heels is P3 McLaren Mercedes, only 7 points adrift now, 295 points for them. P4 Mercedes Works Team, they are moving up quick and fast as well. They are up to 221 points. A few rounds ago, it was 150. Look at how quickly the points multiplied for them. P5, Aston Martin, they check in. They are up to 68 points. P6, this is going to be a fascinating battle in the second part of the team standings here. Aston Martin is 68. P6 is VCarb with 31. P7 is Haas. They are up to 27 points and are only 4 adrift of the VCarb team. P8, Alpine, they remain on 9 points despite the huge help of grid penalties and the DNS and all that did not help their cause. P9, Williams, they move up. Alex Albon's contribution here up to 4 points for them. And Kick Sauber Ferrari, someone has to come in last place, and that is where they are. They continue to run with 0 points. Wow. All right, so you have heard our take on this thrilling, enthralling, rain-filled, drying out, sunny at times, all sorts of any element in Formula One you want. I think you had it in this race. British Grand Prix. We're now going to turn it over to you guys in the fan email segment, and boy, do we have some good stuff in here. So Cody, it's your time to shine here. This is actually in the order that I got them. I checked the timestamps. So here we go. What do we got here?
All right. Our first fan email comes in from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, hello, team. Well, the race was kind of like the Canada GP with the weather conditions and that George Russell pole. But what was your thoughts on McLaren's strategy? They didn't seem to get this spot on, but it looks like Lewis is going to win at last. And he did. And it was awesome. And we all loved that Lewis got that race win. As far as the McLaren strategy goes, I do think we got that one pretty nailed in earlier with them making some questionable calls, not doing the double stack with Lando and Oscar, and then seemingly not getting the tire compound call right at the end of the race. Yeah, they definitely missed a few beats there. Even so, they still came out of this with pretty good results. Third and fourth, that's a good haul of points. It still allows them to make some really good gains on Ferrari and the constructors. But it does leave you wondering what was left on the table, because we could have saw perhaps another Lando win. I'm sure the British would have been very happy with him getting that win as well.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's another what could have been type of situation. And, I saw that there's a shot of Lando. He stayed in the car even when he got to the pit boards to go onto the podium for a very long time. And he was very emotional on the radio. He was very, very, very disappointed that he could not eke that one out because he thought it was there. And, the bottom line is Andrea Stella, in an interview with Ted Kravitz, admitted, 1, they should have double stacked, and 2, they should have put Lando on a medium tire. So they know where they fouled it up. My thing with this moving forward is that the process has to get better. The process is what needs to be looked at. It's not that they're not talking about making the right calls. All the right calls were on the table, and they were on the table for everybody. But they got to get through this process quicker, more efficiently, and at some point, you got to just commit and go with it and tell Lando, who I know wants to have all the stuff, he's got to let that part kind of go. I think that's the next evolution of him as a driver. There's at some point where Lewis Hamilton trusts Peter Bonington implicitly. Max Verstappen trusts Lambiase implicitly. I don't know that Lando always trusts Will Joseph implicitly. And that's, I think, that's what they have to address. Now, I know they're going to work at it, and I know they're going to try to get better at it, but that's what I see moving forward.
All right. Next one in comes from the Formula. And they said, what a boring race. Nothing exciting happened. Just kidding, apart from Lewis winning. That was the best race I've seen in recent memory. I'm sure you've already discussed the McLaren pit blunder. Yeah, several times. So I'll bring up some other points. Nico Hulkenberg needs to be in discussion for a top drive. I'm not sure the international broadcast even mentioned his name once, and he finished P6. And then Lewis Hamilton only gained one position during the course of the race. Super unimpressive, if you ask me. Man, the Formula throwing some shade there. I'm sure it's all in good faith, though. Lewis Hamilton, as we all know, only had one position that he needed to gain, and he made it happen. So, again, still very happy with the Lewis Hamilton victory there. We did already talk about how Nico Hulkenberg did not get a whole lot of room on the broadcast, even though he snuck into that P6. But we're talking about it. We know how well he did, and while it looks right now like he is taking a step down by going to Steak Sauber, we can only hope that when Audi comes in to take over that team with the new regulations, that you never know what can happen in Formula One, especially when there's big regulation changes. Nico Hulkenberg might end up making that into a top drive. So we'll just have to wait and see. We've got a couple years before we get to that point, though.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on the Audi thing, the Audi stuff that they're working on is nothing that you're seeing at the racetrack. It's about infrastructure. It's about setting up that team. It's about putting the right people in place for when it is to come online. And as a fan base, it's got to be super frustrating to know that none of where the big push is nothing that's going to affect this year. It's probably not going to affect next year. And, you just have to have faith that they're able to put things together. Now they've hired Andreas Seidel, that's what he's known for, is setting up structure. He did it with his Le Mans team. He did it with McLaren, and he got them out of, the doldrums that they were in. So, and he's good at simplifying, putting in a structure, and executing on that structure. And you got to think that that's what he's been doing. And the fact that you haven't seen or heard from him. And I said when they hired him, I said, he's going to go away and you're never going to see and hear from him for a long time. And you're only going to see the fruit of it when the Audi people come in. So, yeah, I mean, but pair that now with Nico Hulkenberg. And one thing we didn't also talk about for Haas, Ollie Behrman, has signed to at least, if nothing else, replace Nico Hulkenberg. So they have one driver confirmed. The Kevin Magnussen seat is still kind of up for grabs, whether that will be K-Mag or someone else. We don't know yet. But congrats to Ollie Behrman, who now means that I get to do my favorite thing in radio and drop little bears here and there all over the place. So get ready for that when he starts scoring points. But anyway. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I look forward to all of the bear puns as well. It'll be fantastic. Our next fan email comes in from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she said, well, who said a triple header is boring? Firstly, awful tire choices from McLaren. Quite frankly, their calls have been appalling in this race. Piastri and Norris both could have won this race. Almost as bad as Charles Leclerc. Perez was a tester in this race for Max. I will excuse that, though awful again. But what on earth happened with the calls for Leclerc? I don't know what deal he did with the luck gods to win at Monaco, because ever since then, it has been hell for him. I am not his biggest fan, but I will give credit to Lewis Hamilton for his first win since 2021. I honestly thought he would never win again. Are Mercedes back? Well, time will tell, but 2 wins on the bounce is a great step. And yeah, I hadn't even really considered that Mercedes now has 2 in a row. And points for Alex Albon again. And a much improved performance from Logan Sargent as well. Keeping it on track was a good thing to see. Finally, what a weekend for Great Britain. We had our election day on Friday morning, England won the football on Saturday, and we had a British winner for the British Grand Prix on Sunday. And then a small amendment from her here. I forgot to add Gasly's 50-place grid drop to change the engine. Then the gearbox goes on the formation lap. I mean, talk about hilarious in hindsight. Yeah. Lots of good stuff there.
That's one where I would say the racing gods have a sick sense of humor. You change all the other components. The one thing you didn't change was the gearbox, and what dies is the gearbox. But a lot of this we've kind of already talked about. But we've talked about the McLaren calls. I'm good there. We talked a little bit about Leclerc. Just literally tried the home run strategy, and it did not pay off because it did not rain enough. So, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of what happens with these intermediate tires. Nobody even, despite the fact that it was pretty wet at times, even thought about full wets, because we've talked about this too. Pirelli just doesn't seem to want to put the research in to make those tires really viable in those conditions. So this is kind of what you get: a race to the inters and then a race from the inters. And that's pretty much what we saw. I will give Lewis Hamilton all of the props due for this one. To stick to it, to come back into it mentally, given the fact that he could have easily has checked out. He could have easily said, "This is a lame duck year. It doesn't really matter. George can do what he wants. I'm going to finish P5, P6, and be happy with that." And later, but he got inspired for being at his favorite track, and him and Fernando have the same disease. You give these guys a sniff for a win and watch them come alive. And Lewis came alive. He was definitely on it more this weekend than I had seen him in even some previous ones. And good on him for closing the show. Way to go.
Yeah, they definitely got those extra few tenths for the being the home race and getting that extra bit of motivation to win. That was the first thing that I thought when I saw Mercedes locked out the front row, and I was like, well, they're both Brits, so they're both getting that little extra bit for this race. And yeah, it was a fantastic race for Lewis Hamilton. I'm a little cautious to say that Mercedes are back. Now, they have won 2 in a row, which is great, and they did lock out the front row for this race on pace. However, British Grand Prix had a lot of changeable conditions, which can throw the established pecking order for a loop. We do have to remember that George Russell had the last race handed to him on a silver platter when Max and Lando took each other out of the race win. They were quite a ways ahead of Russell at the time. And while, yes, he did have to be there to snatch up the victory, he would have been quite far off from it. So I'm not sure I would say that they're back just yet, but they are making excellent strides forward. And the more teams that are in the competitive pecking order at the front, the better. I mean, we've seen now McLaren is consistently vying for wins. Mercedes is now up there fighting for wins when they can as well. And while Ferrari is slumping a little bit at the moment, they've already got a couple wins this year as well. It's crazy that we're 12 races in here, and after what we saw last year, when Red Bull won 21 out of 22 races, we're 12 in here, and we've had I
think it's 6 and 6.
Yeah, 6 and 6. Yeah, so Max has won 6, and the other 6 have been won by not Max. So definitely a much more competitive season this year than I was expecting. And I really hope it carries through to the rest of the season because, I don't want to jinx it, got to knock on wood here, but there's always that chance that we're going to come back from the summer break and Red Bull is going to have brought some crazy upgrades and they're just going to win the rest of the season and it's not going to be fun anymore. So yeah, let's hope it stays competitive throughout.
Yeah, I just wrap up real quick. I tend to agree. I do think we're going to see, this is what we've wanted. And I don't know, to the question about Mercedes, I kind of agree with you. I don't know that they are they're with McLaren and Red Bull on overall pace in all areas, but they're close, and they've taken advantage of conditions that have favored their car. Canada and here, cold, damp, wet. They like that. Now we're going to go from here to the Hungaroring, where it's usually pushing, in Fahrenheit terms, triple digits, because it's in the middle of July. It's usually very hot. If they are doing this there and they're not eating through their tires there, then they're understanding their car a hell of a lot better, and you're going to see real progress. And then I would say it's on amongst these four teams. And I think when we were at a barbecue yesterday, we kind of said it to a couple people. We said, any one of five guys could have won this race, and we didn't know which one. And that sentence is what we wanted for so long.
Yep, I agree. Our next email comes in from Roberto Morias. Thank you, Roberto. And he says, Lewis had a great race, but I want to talk about Max, the new Max, post-Austria. Cold, measured, efficient, and still super fast, even when his car is not. Made me think of the great races from Prost. It seems to me he has reflected on his clash with Norris and emerged a more complete driver. Now, I think a lot of people said that about Max after his 2021 clash with Lewis and how dominant he was in 2022 and then again in 2023, that at that time we were seeing the new Max, who was cold, measured, efficient, and extremely fast. So I think that's just kind of how Max is at this point. When he is really good, he is really, really, really good. And whenever there is something that goes wrong, he's still really good. But I don't think we've seen the last of his antics, I guess I will call them. Still a fan, but we will call them antics with, very aggressive defending and fighting for every inch that he can. I think we saw him be less aggressive in this race because at the times where he was getting passed by, say, the McLarens of Lando and Piastri, his pace was pretty bad. The tires were worn. I don't think he really had a whole lot to defend, and it was still pretty early on in the race. In Austria, he was fighting for the win there at the end, just hoping he could hold off Lando long enough that he ran out of fight. Here, he had 3/4 of the race to come back after that, and I think he knew it. So I think that's why we didn't see the aggressive driving from him, because he knew it wasn't the time for that. And I guess we could lend that to him being measured and efficient, as you described him. And I think it worked out for him. It was really nice to come out of this race with really nothing controversial happening. And we can just look back on it and be like, damn, that was a great race, and everyone can be happy about it. And we don't have to keep talking about Max and Lando taking each other out for like 4 more weeks, even though we probably will. But
Twitter will, because that's what Twitter
definitely will. But yes, I wouldn't really personally describe this as the new Max. I would say it is just the existing Max. But I will also agree with you that it does seem like he reflected on what happened in Austria, and at the very least kept it really clean this time around. And yes, he is very measured and efficient. He made it back to P2 and almost the race win when, after the first 20 laps, I never would have believed that.
Yeah, I've said this many times. You cannot write that guy off, and you have to not beat him once. You have to keep beating him again and again, because I correlate Max Verstappen, and I've talked about this a couple of times. I'm getting back into my old chess habits, and I know the number 1 rated chess player in the world is a guy by the name Magnus Carlsen, and the thing that they say about Magnus is the same thing that they say about Max. He asks questions. He makes you make decisions. He made Lando make decisions in Austria, good, bad, or indifferent. That's what he did. he didn't have to ask questions early because there was no point to do that. But at the end of the race, there he was. He asked a question that said, what if I put on a hard tire and go out and do that? And look at what he did. He was setting, the timing screens were purple and green for almost every lap.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just saw that and you said, well, damn, again, whoever made that call gets a pat on the back for a strategy decision, because I didn't see that working. I saw that and I went, that doesn't make sense given where we are and what's left, but okay. And shoot, I got proven really wrong really quickly. But I also want to think this was going to always be Max on his best behavior, especially given where we were, given who he was fighting, all of that put together. I don't think Max was going to put a foot wrong unless it was for a win. And he never got to. Now, we never got to see Max v. Lewis at the end. Had we seen that, maybe we're singing a very different tune. We don't know,
man,
and we'll never know.
I'm not even really sure. I'd want to know what would happen if Lewis Hamilton was going to take this win and Max took it away from him, or even worse, like crashed each other out or something like that. Mm-hmm. He'd have a really hard time leaving Great Britain, that's for sure. But didn't happen, so we don't have to worry about it.
We don't have to go there. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to think about it. Lewis won. Max was second. 2 Brits on the podium. I mean, if you were a British fan, Sky Sports, I think, had their own personal British orgasm today, just of all of that. It was all right there for you in spades. And congratulations to everybody who did that. So, full props all the way around.
Yes, indeed. Our last fan email comes from John. Yes, that John. Been on the show plenty of times before. Or was on. What is the right way to say this, John?
He's the founder. We're sitting here because of him.
Yes, that's John. And he picked probably the best time for him, knowing him as a super Lewis fan. This makes sense that he would be chiming in here. And he says, today was the day to silence the haters. Once again, proving that if you give this man a capable machine, he will come out on top. Today was the ultimate driver's race through constantly changing conditions, and the GOAT stood on top. There have been very few sports-related events in my life that have brought me to tears, but today was one of those days. Still we rise, still we rise. And yes, if it was not clear before, it is now very, very clear that John is a big Lewis fan. And this was the perfect day to be a big Lewis fan, because he gets that win on home turf, breaks the duck. He's got that win. And there's a lot of different ways that they were splitting it up on the broadcast, that it was like almost 1,000 days, around, pretty much 2.5 seasons, or just about 3 years, and yada, yada, yada. But really, it has been a long time since we saw a Lewis Hamilton victory. And to me, it's insane after the run from 2014 to 2021, where it was the Lewis show almost throughout, that we could have 2 seasons in a row where we didn't have a Lewis Hamilton victory. And it felt very strange. And it is great to see him back on top. He was, we've said it several times now, very emotional, pretty much brought to tears, driving around with the fist pumps and the British flag. It was very good to see. Everyone happy for him. Max happy for him. George happy for him. It was really good to hear God Save the King on the podium. And yes, I hope, John, for your sake, that this isn't just a flash in the pan. I'm hoping that we see more wins from Lewis throughout this season. I was hoping so much that he would get at least one more win before leaving Mercedes, because it didn't really feel right after all of his success with Mercedes to leave with 3 seasons of no wins. So it is really good that he got this one in, and I hope we get in a few more. And then I hope we get in even a few more at Ferrari.
Well, I've said before. I mean, if he wins and he wins the championship at Ferrari, there's going to be hymns at Maranello with his name in them
Mhm.
forever. I mean, they will be singing from the rafters in Italy for sure with that. But this is if this is the last win in Mercedes, and I don't think it will be given the form. I definitely think both him and George will be in contention at other places because we got so many different types of tracks, and Mercedes is definitely right now the hottest team in Formula One, especially given the last 2 weeks. Can't deny that, especially given the results. So I think they're going to have chances to win again. And I hope that Lewis can at least win one more. But if this is the swan song, what a swan song. You really couldn't write it a whole lot better. Both of his parents were there. The home fans were going crazy. It was in those mixed conditions that Lewis has always been throughout his entire career, one of the best at. You really, what else can you say? I mean, it's 104 race wins for crying out loud. You got to remember that. You got to sometimes put that back into perspective and go, wow. And to still be doing it, pushing 40, is a testament to his physical regimen and the fact that he keeps himself in as good a shape as he does, and all the Zen and all of the stuff it all goes into. That guy can still freaking drive at the end of the day. And Ferrari are getting one hell of an asset. And if you didn't think that, here was proof positive of what they're getting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely a good weekend to silence the haters. Thank you so much to all of our fans who contributed to the show. We really do love your emails, and we got a lot of them this time. And you guys had so many good points, so it's really good to bring them up and talk to you guys.
Yeah, we always. I love the fact that we had a lot of good interaction. I was physically just kind of tired after this race, so I didn't do a whole lot of extra Twitter stuff with this one. But I saw it come in throughout the course of the day, and I'm like, wow, we're going to have a really good discussion. So thank you all. Please continue to do that. I enjoy getting the different perspectives. We had a comment about Lewis, comment about Max. This is some what we want to do. So it's great stuff. So thank you so much for participating in our little thing here. All right, so we will move on to our awards. And as we are apt to do, we will start with the rubbish. I think we have a lot of convergence here. These were pretty relatively easy to hand out. So I'll go first here. And my rubbish award is seriously Sergio Perez. It's now or never, dude. You got to get your stuff together, and it's got to happen now. This is not funny anymore. I mean, it is kind of a ha thing now. But the fact of the matter is, with 12 rounds to go, it's only, and I realize this, it's Red Bull are not in trouble in the constructors. But if this keeps going like this, and Max is fighting this thing with one-handed, it could potentially get there and get there quicker than anybody ever thought. So seriously, Sergio, get on it quick, man. Because in the rubbish bin this weekend, yikes.
Yep, I am in agreement with you. I have Sergio Perez for the rubbish award. There's too much action coming from both drivers and several other constructors now for Red Bull to take this one just from Max alone. Last year was a different story. Max was so incredibly dominant that I think Perez's performance really didn't make much of a difference. But even last year, he still had a couple wins and a bunch of podiums. And so far this year, he has no wins. He's got several podiums that came earlier in the season. But from his last 6 races here, what do we got? We've got an 8th retirement, an 8th, a 7th in Austria in the regular Grand Prix, and an 8th in the sprint, and then a 17th here in Great Britain. So huge slump in form. A lot of that coming after it was announced that he was signed to a two-year extension on his contract. He doesn't really have much to show for it afterwards. So yes, I agree. Sergio, I like you a lot. I would love for you to stay in that seat, but you got to show what you can do, because eventually Red Bull's going to get sick of what's happening. They've definitely dropped drivers for less. So yeah, it's time for Checo to pick up the pace, or else he risks losing that seat to a number of drivers.
Yes, and there are plenty ready and willing to go. I've seen rumors of still Daniel Ricciardo potentially now. I believe, I think you have the two Red Bull forces at work. You have the Christian Horner faction who want the veteran driver, who want to put, I think, Daniel Ricciardo in there if it's not Sergio. And I think you have the Helmut Marko side pushing Liam Lawson. I don't think anybody's pushing Yuki Tsunoda, which to me is ridiculously unfortunate because I think Yuki's been great. But I think on the Marco side, they're definitely pushing Liam Lawson to try to get in there too. Liam Lawson, interestingly enough, is going to be testing the RB20 later this week and may prove to be a pivotal show me what you got, kid type of situation. So, yeah, and with Perez now reopening a door that Red Bull thought they closed because of the poor form, things could still get spicy. We'll keep following it, that's for sure. All right, so we will move on to our analysis paralysis. I think this one is universal. I hate calling out my team when they do stuff like this, but got to do it. They should have double stacked when Piastri was 1.5 seconds behind Lando. 8-second loss is better than a 20-second loss. That's just simple math. They know that. They'll fix that hopefully next time. But the bigger issue for me was the lack of decisiveness on what tire to fit for Lando. It was way too long of a discussion. At some point, the discussion needs to end, and we have to make a decision, and we have to go with it. And when Lando's basically saying just any slick tire, that means you've discussed this for too long. Know your stuff. Know what your car is capable of. Know that your car really likes the medium tire. I can tell you that. Medium tire, McLaren, good. Do it better next time, please.
Once again, I'm in agreement with you. McLaren is going to get the analysis paralysis award. Now, not having heard the radio chatter like you have, I was more willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on the tire call at the end because, the soft might have worked. It's hard to make those calls sometimes for the tires, but the one that I have more trouble forgiving is the not double stacking. As said before, you practice double stacks so that when an opportunity to do a double stack comes up, you can do it. And this was that time. We saw Mercedes do it, and it worked. And instead, you left Piastri hung out to dry, took away his chances at a win. And I really think that it was kind of a no-brainer. So, they're getting the analysis paralysis for not making that call.
Fair enough. Good points there for sure. All right, so we'll move into our dark horse, and I think we've got this, again, convergence on this one too. Nico Hülkenberg takes this honor, and some TV coverage of what he actually did to earn that award would be nice, Sky Sports, but or F1 TV, or whoever was running the pictures, because I saw more of the Kevin Magnussen almost crash than I saw of Nico Hülkenberg. And that's saying something. So, yeah, good on you, Haas. This could be a small, well, a lesser, but it feels a lot like this year is kind of the year of the feel-good story. And Haas coming back from kind of the barrenness of nothing last year to now knocking on the door of P6 is another good one to add to the pile here.
Yeah, it is definitely some of the best performance that we've seen out of Haas for many seasons now. Once again, we are in agreement. My dark horse award is going to Nico Hülkenberg, and at this point, Hülkenberg is finishing well in the points so often that it's almost outside of dark horse territory. If he keeps doing this, he won't be the dark horse anymore. He will just be there getting points.
And he's also knocking on the door of the top 10 in the drivers. The P10 position is actually fascinating. There's 3 guys. Lance Stroll has it now again because of today. There's 3 guys within 1 point. It's Stroll, Tsunoda, and now Hülkenberg within 3 points for P10 in the drivers. So that's going to be something to watch as well. This may. I've said it. I think this is literally like the inverse 2012 season where we had the max dominance a little early, and now we're seeing the randomness. Where 2012 was the randomness early, and then Vettel got it together and just dominated the second half. Let's hope that we had the Max little bit of domination and now the randomness and the craziness for the second half of the season, because I'm all here for it.
As am I.
All right. Our last award. I don't think we're going to have any surprises here. Driver of the day. This one goes to Lewis Hamilton. Win number 104. Enough said. The guys still got it. Congrats on making it through a very difficult period and for coming out on the other side. That emotion was real. I mean, sometimes you think sometimes it doesn't affect people. The stuff with his parents was real. The stuff on the podium was real. The stuff afterwards where all the fans were hanging out and he climbed up. I was afraid he was going to fall and break his neck because he tried to get up like on the fence and hold the trophy. And those fences are not designed to be climbed on. And I'm like, dude, I really don't want you to break your neck. That would not be good. Be careful. And luckily he got through that without getting any sort of thing. But yeah, just Lewis Hamilton, driver of the day, all the way.
Mm-hmm. Once again, we are in agreement. Lewis Hamilton, driver of the day. I'm pretty sure that's what the fans voted for too. I have to give this award to Lewis Hamilton, or else I might be flayed, because we've got one of the most popular British drivers ever, undoubtedly the most successful British driver ever, winning the British Grand Prix after such a long period of no wins. It is a feel-good moment for sure. And yeah, very happy to see him get this win and hope there's more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. In full agreement there. All right, so we will now turn the page and we will talk predictions. And like we said, when Max doesn't do well, our predictions tend to suffer. And even though we didn't have Max winning, that was about the only thing that we got right, was we didn't have Max winning. But Cody, you finished with 3 points on the weekend. You got P2 for the podium. That was Max Verstappen, so good call there. You got the fastest lap time because you were quicker. The lap times across the board were quicker this weekend. And because Team GB brought it home. I don't know the words to that song, otherwise I would sing it, like, it's coming home, it's coming home. They did do that, so you got the prop bet. I also finished with 3 points, so in typical football fashion for the Europeans, we tied. I got P2 on the podium with Max. I got the quali fastest time because the quali times were quicker, and I also got the prop bet as well. So I guess this weekend is a push until the next one. All right, so we are now pretty much to the end of our rundown. That is it for the British Grand Prix. It was a gift that kept on giving the whole weekend long. I enjoyed it thoroughly. We'll take a quick break. We'll re-rack. We'll come back for the Hungaroring and for Spa Francorchamps before the summer break. So the F1 action is don't go far. You only got one weekend off, and then we're right back to it with a doubleheader before the summer break. But in between, we're going to have our exclusive interview with Guardian reporter Gilles Richards talking about his book. So you won't want to miss that. Look for it to drop sometime next weekend. So stay tuned to all that. I will make sure to promote all across all of the platforms. And we have some reading to do because we have to get ready for this interview. So we're procrastinating, and that's not a good thing. But we're definitely going to want to do this and do it right. And we hope it's going to be something for you guys. We're proud to bring this kind of stuff to you. And it's I'm literally going to open the show with like, why do we do this? It's for cool stuff like this. So hopefully it's going to be a great discussion. We're all excited for it. But Cody, any last thoughts before we hop on out for the night?
It's a great way to wrap up the first triple header of the year. Had a lot of really good action packed into these last 3 Grand Prix. And as you said, just one weekend off before we head into that double header before the summer break. So, yeah, lots of F1 going on. It's something that I love, though, and it would get really busy for me and you if we had Formula One every weekend. But I do find myself wishing for it sometimes.
I probably will miss it a little bit next weekend, not like waking up and going, wait, I don't have to be up at the crack of dawn to watch practice or qualifying or something. The other thing I do like is I do like that new streaming F1 channel. That actually sometimes, even though it's 5 days later, it lets you do a good rewatch of stuff. So check that out if you're so inclined out there. I think Samsung TV Plus and Tubi has it, and a couple others have it. So it's interesting stuff. I like the way what they're kind of doing with it. But anyway, for Cody, it's been Andy. This was a really fun weekend. This was a lot of fun Grand Prix. More, please, as always. And folks, may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at outlapf1 podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.